It's a sure thing. Change, change. Expect a miracle change. Watch me change when you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do 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 do.
The views and opinions of our guest and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of New Thought Media Network, or any organization we may be affiliated with. Here at New Thought Media Network, we welcome freedom of speech and courageous conversations. There are many topics that can be difficult to navigate. Challenging the status quo and engaging in lively debate is important to expanding our understanding of one another, and life in general. Creating a peaceful world doesn't happen because no one disagrees, it happens from a willingness to understanding one another. In our programming, we strive to expand consciousness and assist people in creating remarkable lives. Your comments are welcome at info@ntmedia.org.
Good afternoon. I'm Barbara Jean.
And
I'm Marg.
We're both one because we spoke together, not because of any other reason.
I love it. You're watching Spirit Cafe Show here on the New Thought Media Network, and we are so together.
Yes, we are. We are perfectly imperfect, which I love.
I love it. I love it. Marg, you're up with the land acknowledgement.
Thank you so much. We are honored to be meeting on this land that many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people from across Turtle Island call home. We acknowledge and thank the original caretakers and knowledge keepers of this territory, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa and the Haudenosaunee and the Wendat. We also give thanks to all other Indigenous peoples, recorded and unrecorded, who have shared responsibility for this territory. In honoring the dish with one spoon treaty, which protects this territory, we accept our responsibility to peaceably share and care the resources that surround us. We acknowledge, as inhabitants of these lands, that inequity and discrimination continue to affect our BIPOC and 2SL LGBTQ+ family. We are allies and we take an active part in reconciliation. These words are the first step. Today, we choose to take action. We are one with all life, and today we choose to drop the walls of separation, and we choose to participate in the oneness.
Thank you, Marg. So our guest today is Reverend Deana Dudley, and she's a senior minister at MCC Toronto. She's been serving there for 14 years, but just this past year was named senior pastor. She is a lawyer in the U.S., became a minister, moved to Canada, and MCC Toronto has been doing some remarkable work with refugees, and it is a big concern in our city and many cities across North America right now. It's a great joy to have you here today. Reverend Deana, welcome.
Hey, folks.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's a joy to be with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to have this chat.
Well, it's such a big thing right now. There's so many refugees coming into Canada, and I'm sure into the US as well, and trying to manage all of this. Can you give us a little kind of overview of what MCC Toronto is doing to assist in this way?
Sure. We in I want to say 2007 began a refugee program specifically to assist 2S LGBTQ plus refugees from around the world. Because there are so many countries in which queer people are persecuted. In 45 countries, it's illegal to be gay, to advocate for gay rights. In 7 countries, you can actually be executed for engaging in LGBTQ plus sexual acts. And as a consequence, there are a lot of people who, frankly, are fleeing for their lives. And this has been an issue for a while now, and it has just it's just been growing and growing. There have been a lot of very, very harsh, draconian laws against LGBTQ plus people passed in a number of countries. I think one that most folks may have heard of is in Uganda, which the laws there have been very draconian. And I will say that other countries in Africa are sort of following their lead. But what is very frustrating to me is to know that this drive to increase the persecution of LGBTQ plus folks is being spurred on and financed and pushed by right-wing fundamentalist American Christians. And I find that incredibly frustrating. And also, I will say that these kinds of laws are frankly an odious relic of colonialism and missionization that has been done in Africa. And, you know, a lot of those countries, particularly in Africa and in the Caribbean, basically have, you know, 17th century British sodomy laws. Wow. They just keep sort of updating and making even worse. We do a number of things through our refugee programs here. One of the things that I'm very thankful that we're able to do is that we are what's called a sponsorship agreement holder with the government of Canada, which means that we can bring in folks, sponsor them to come from other countries. They need to have fled their country of origin, become a refugee in some other country registered with the UN High Commission on Refugees, and then we can sponsor them to come here. And we are the only organization that is an exclusive LGBTQ plus sponsorship agreement holder. We focus specifically on that. So we have been able, over the years that we've been doing refugee work, to sponsor about 100 folks. We try to do 7 or 8 a year. We try to keep increasing that number. I think this year we're on track to bring in 9 or 10 people. And that, of course, is just a drop in the bucket. So many folks also come to Canada as asylum seekers. They may come here for various reasons and under various visas, and you know, they may have come as a tourist or for work or something, and then when they get here, they apply for refugee status as an asylum seeker. And one of the things we do is we provide sort of an orientation for newcomers who are in that position. We provide peer support. We provide programs either in person or online to help them navigate their new life in Canada, whether it's, accessing the healthcare system or getting a bank account or just figuring out Toronto's transit system. We do programs like that several times a week. Twice a month, we bring in folks for their initial orientation. And I will tell you that before the COVID pandemic, we were doing that once a month, and we would get 40, 50, maybe 60 people.
Mm-hmm.
Since the pandemic, and since folks have been able to travel more freely, and since the laws have been getting increasingly horrific in places like Uganda and Kenya and Ghana, we now do that twice a month, and we most of the time get about 500 people.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's incredible. The demand is
it's overwhelming. We do this at the church, and on those days you can barely find room to walk around in here. We're a fairly big building.
it is a pretty big building, yeah.
Yeah, and so we just keep plugging away at it. We have about 3 staff who plus a couple of part-time folks who work on this program, and they are busy all the time. And we just are constantly getting more and more requests for help. And it breaks my heart that we can't help all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Which is truly,
Mm-hmm.
But that's the hard part, right?
it is. That's the hard part.
Yes, your invitation.
How can folks partner with you, Deana? Like if there were other organizations or places of worship, churches, anything, who were interested in assisting in this work, is there a way to do that?
Well, there are a lot of other organizations that are doing this work, and a lot of churches. And I will say, obviously Toronto is one of the places that is getting the biggest influx of refugees. Folks just, they come to Canada, they land in Toronto, and, here they are. With the huge increase, I know a number of churches and organizations have stepped up. Some of the predominantly Black churches, for instance, have taken in hundreds of folks, basically living in their gyms and social halls. They are not getting enough support. They're basically going broke doing that. So I would say first thing is, write your members of parliament, advocate for more support for refugees. As I say, there are other churches and organizations that are doing refugee work. But again, we are pretty much the only organization that is specifically geared to LGBTQ plus asylum claimants.
And like I said, 9 or 10 is a drop in the ocean. So how, is there a way to possibly expand that program?
Well, yeah, there is an interesting way. One of the things we do through the refugee program is we can put together what we call a group of 5. And what this means is these are 5 people who band together on their own. They're not necessarily part of our church. They just have a heart for refugees, and they work to raise money to sponsor a refugee. And basically they need to raise between $18,000 and $20,000. And then they can bring someone in, someone who's a refugee registered with the UN High Commission on Refugees. And we help organize those groups, help them figure out fundraising. So if you and 4 of your closest personal friends want to start a group of 5 and organize that, please contact me, and I will put you in touch with the folks in our refugee program, and they will tell you what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the best ways that you can help out.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's, as you say, one person is a drop in the bucket, but that's a life saved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you for coming to this show. It's because you're coming here that you're educating. I'll just take ownership here. You're educating me. It's been in the past couple of years that I realized that I have white privilege. And today you're educating me, and my heart is breaking because I have gay privilege as well.
Yeah.
I'm married to a woman, and I'm supported by family and friends and my spiritual community. And you're bringing to the forefront what a privilege that is. So thank you.
It absolutely is. And doing this work has certainly opened my eyes. I've known I have privilege. I'm white. I'm an American. My wife got me a T-shirt the other day, a couple of months ago, actually, that says "dangerously overeducated," and I have a position where I can be, openly lesbian. I sometimes say I'm a professional lesbian and a full-time professional fanatic. But that's all privilege. If I can tell a little story, summer before last, literally the day I became the acting senior pastor of this church, I got a call, and what had happened was there was a big, the World AIDS Conference took place in Montreal in July of 2021, something like that. And a number of folks who came to that conference from Africa, who were HIV activists, who were queer, and who were frankly in danger in their home countries, either for being queer or simply for being an advocate for queer people and for people with HIV. They were kind of persona non grata at home, and they made claims. And we suddenly needed to find housing like that for 25 people. And because many of them were themselves HIV positive, we really wanted to try and keep them out of the shelter system. And so I got that call, and I knew that, okay, that was on a Friday night. I knew Sunday morning I was going to stand up in my church and ask people to step forward and open their homes. But, you got to walk the talk. So I knew that if I were going to do that, I needed to do the same thing. So my first call was to my wife saying, can we take in a refugee? And she, God bless her, said, of course. And so in a couple of days, a young woman from Uganda came to live with us. And she stayed with us for like 15 months. She just moved out a few months ago, got her own place. She's got a job. She just recently got her PR card, so she can now start the process of bringing her children here, because she left behind, a 2 and 5 year old, and she hasn't seen them since. But it was just such an eye-opening experience to have her living with us, and such a joy. And it really was a constant reminder of my own privilege. A few days after she arrived, she came to me with a bundle of clothing in her hands, and she says, where do you wash clothes? And honest to God, she really might have meant, where's the stream? And my wife and I had recently moved into her childhood home, which was 50 years old, 60 years old, I guess. And the washer and dryer in the basement were made in the 70s. They don't make them like they used to, obviously. And they were old and decrepit and rusty and dirty, and I wasn't using them. I was sending the laundry out. And they didn't work the way they're supposed to. The washer was permanently set on hot water and extra large load, and the dryer, basically, if the door was open, it was on, it was off, and if it was closed, it was on. None of the switches worked. And she thought they were the most amazing things ever. And I realized, Deana, you're an idiot. Clean them up and use them, because they are a privilege. So I'm constantly reminded of that by doing this work.
When I went to Kenya in January, it was interesting to see the level of poverty, but matched with that, the level of joy. And that for me was, I look at the level of privilege we have here, the things we take for granted, and how we complain constantly about not having enough, not having the right thing, not earning enough, gripe and complain, bitch and complain. And the truth is, we are very, very privileged here. And I think sharing is a really good idea.
Yeah. And to me, the only right response to that is, one, gratitude.
Absolutely.
And two, sharing. I am constantly reminded of the saying of Jesus in the Gospels, of those to whom much is given, much is also required. And, I don't necessarily take the Bible literally, but there are a few passages like that, I think
literal translation.
That's pretty clear. It doesn't suffer a lot of interpretation.
Exactly. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still in effect.
Yeah.
Wow. I serve with PWA Toronto, and we are facing the same situation with all the refugees. And I think one of the things that I find frustrating is the amount of vacant buildings around the city while we have people living in tents in the dead of winter. And I don't know what it would take for the city to change its rulings, that if you've got vacant space boarded up, you have a timeline where you have to get it rented and reopened, or you need to use it for another function. Like, I think there's so much we could do that out of greed or whatever, we're not doing it.
Yeah. I know the city is trying to push that with the new vacant home tax. You have to, declare that you are actually using this gift that you have, or you're going to pay a tax on it for not doing so, which I think is completely appropriate. I think at the moment it just applies to houses and dwelling units, but there are places I've heard of where they take empty strip malls and make them into housing, so it can be done. It just requires money and political will. And unfortunately, refugees are not the most popular political topic. There are lots of folks who like the people who are supporting our refugee program, who really, really appreciate the need And there are others who, ridiculously say, "Oh, they're taking our jobs. They're mooching off of our social services," which is all completely untrue.
Exactly.
And that comes from fear, right? It's a fear-based response
Yeah.
to greed and fear, right?
Even fear.
Because I think, one of the other things I think, and maybe I'm wrong, is people are afraid to take in refugees themselves because of the unknown, because of, the ignorance. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but there's fear behind that because they don't know what to expect. They don't know, what to do.
Yeah.
And all that kind of thing. Do you think there's a way to, I don't know. I mean, it's basically education, right?
Yeah. And we are kind of conditioned in some ways to fear the other.
Mm-hmm.
And we definitely other people,
Yeah.
and it's the stranger, and there is, I guess kind of an atavistic fear of strangers.
Mm-hmm. And the unknown, fear of the
Yeah.
unknown. And what am I opening myself up to? What am I letting into my home? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I called my wife and said, "Can we take in a refugee?" She said, "How long?" And I have no idea.
Mm.
And I think we thought, a few months, 6 months. It was 15 months, and it wasn't always easy.
Mm-hmm.
There were times we wanted our spare room back,
Mm-hmm.
but we're so glad we did it. So glad, and we would do it again.
Mm-hmm.
We did the same thing. We put somebody in for 9 months, and I've never regretted it, not even for a minute. I think the idea of, othering or fearing strangers is such a ludicrous thing, because sometimes the people you need to fear most are the ones that are inside your home, not the ones you bring in later, or it's, I think we have to change that story of stranger danger that we teach children. It's a flawed theory, and I find it a little upsetting because there's so many people in need, but because we're so afraid of people just like us, it really is a senseless thing to fear strangers. I always taught my daughter, trust your intuition. If it feels wrong, it probably is. So walk away. But if you get a really good feeling, trust that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my way I do things. That's what I
Yeah.
found.
Absolutely.
This is a different take on fear, but I often fear languaging. Am I going to say the wrong thing? Am I going to address you the wrong way?
Yeah.
And so sometimes, I know this will be a surprise to Barbara and Cheryl, I keep my mouth closed because I'm afraid of addressing somebody the wrong way.
And you've got culture, right? Cultural differences as well. So there can often be misunderstandings, misinterpretation. And that's okay if people are willing to be open to that, to understanding that that's going to happen. And, that we just need to work through that.
Absolutely. And again, it goes back to education, and the education is a constant process. I think of our congregation, which has supported and proudly supported this program for many years now. And yet there are still some folks who don't entirely understand what we're doing. And for instance, a couple of months ago, one of our members went up to someone in the social hall after service and went up to, and first of all, this was the wrong thing to do, because sometimes people, if they see a Black person in our church, and there are certainly plenty of them, and a lot of them are refugees, many of them are also not refugees, but they went up to this person and said, "Are you gay?" Well, first of all, I guess second of all, it was stupid to assume it was a refugee. And then again, really rude to ask that question. And I'm of the opinion, if you ask a rude question and you get a rude answer in return, you kind of had it coming. And the person he asked said, "Hell no." And they thought, "Oh my God, we're these people are gaming the system, and they're not really gay, or they're not gay enough or something." It's like, dude, that guy came from a country where if somebody asked him if he were gay and he didn't answer hell no in a nanosecond, he could be killed.
Yeah.
You know, so what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
So it's a constant process of trying to inspire people to be welcoming and generous,
and to create an awareness.
Yeah.
Well,
We're getting a message for commercial.
Yeah, we're going to take a little commercial break here, and we'll be right back. You're watching Spirit Cafe Show on the New Thought Media Network. Our guest is the Reverend Deana Dudley from MCC Toronto, and we're talking about the refugee situation in Canada and everywhere for that matter. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hepperlin Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Spiritual Center, Kitchener, Om Center for Spiritual Living, La Mesa, Satya Center, Center for Spiritual Living, North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for making New Thought Media Network a place to be. Please come be you. And remember, like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
Welcome back.
All righty. So talking about refugees and talking about how to educate people about the situation and why it's necessary for us to do our piece. I think we forget sometimes that we're all connected, that if we leave one person out, we've actually caused harm to ourselves as well.
Absolutely.
What are the steps in education that you've taken at MCC, Reverend Deana?
We've been having some specific information sessions, both to educate people about the refugee program in general, and also, as I mentioned before, to educate people on the process of creating a circle of five folks who want to sponsor someone.
Mhm.
You know, in terms of education, we're also educating refugees. Like I said, we have sessions generally twice a week online. Interestingly, we were doing them on Zoom, but Zoom had, even though we got the premium package, had limited us to 300 online attendees. And we switched to Microsoft Teams because there was no limit, and we were often exceeding Zoom's requirements. So we do that twice a week. You know, it may be sessions with lawyers who can explain the asylum process. It may be folks who explain how to create a resume and for Canadian jobs. Because most of these folks, once they are recognized as an asylum seeker, even before they can get their permanent residence card, they can get a work permit and work. And these are hardworking people. You know, the young woman who was staying with us got a job pretty quickly. In fact, she was working for PWA, the People with AIDS Foundation, but she was always looking for, you know, extra work she could get on evenings and weekends, you know, because she was sending money back home to help her family. So things like how to get a Canadian bank account, places where you can volunteer, dating in Canada, you know, everything about creating a new life for yourself in this country where you can be safe.
And everything is so different here. One of the things I noticed, I was at a World AIDS Day event, not this past year, the year before, and we were outside at the AIDS Memorial, and it was really cold. And there was one young gentleman there.
This is December 1st.
December 1st. It was freezing out. And there was one young gentleman there who was barefoot in sandals. And I thought, I think we need to offer a class in how to dress for the different seasons, because they're coming from a country where summer's the norm.
Well, that's the thing, you know. One of the things that we realized with the young woman who was staying with us, she was from Uganda. Uganda is right on the equator. Not only do they not have winter, they don't even have seasons, really. You know, she was absolutely fascinated as, you know, fall began to come and the leaves started turning different colors. She'd never seen anything like that before. And, you know, along about the middle of September, she said, "Is this winter?" And it's like, "No, dear, it's going to get worse." And, you know, one of the other things we do as part of our refugee program is we distribute clothing. And in particular, this past winter, we distributed an awful lot of winter coats. We had a couple of, you know, clothing giveaway days where we distributed over 700 winter coats, and we still had a waiting list of about 300.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's something that is part of the education process.
Yeah. And are
Now,
there,
mind you, Barbara, at that World AIDS Day thing at the memorial, if it hadn't been actually snowing and slush on the ground, I might have been wearing sandals too, just because I hate my boots. But I know there are times when I need them. And yeah, so that was.
well, I had an extra pair of socks with me that day.
Yeah.
Because I was wearing my boots and my socks, but I knew I would probably be too cold and would need a second pair. So I gave him my pair of socks.
Oh my God, socks with sandals? Are you kidding?
I know. Better that than frozen toes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It shows the importance of education, you know. I often say you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And so, Barbara, a key example of that was perhaps you didn't think about educating the refugees about the climate and the clothing that they may wear. Observing on that day, you saw the need for educating in that way. And now, again, with the cafe, providing that education too. So you don't know what you don't know until you know it.
Yeah.
You can coin that phrase if you like.
That's something that everybody I think can help with. We all have, those of us who have lived in Canada for quite a while probably have proper clothing. We may have more clothing than we need. I know I do. And come next fall, if you're clearing out your closet and you have extra warm clothing, please donate it to any group that's assisting refugees, because they're pretty much all going to need it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
That was one of the things Pierre and I did when we downsized our house. We took everything to PWA. Like it was.
They do a great clothing giveaway. I got to tell you, in fact, the young woman who was staying with us and was working at PWA came home one day with this lovely parka. And I said, let me take this to be dry cleaned for you. And I took it to the dry cleaner and she said, oh my gosh, this is an expensive parka. And I don't know anything about fashion. I couldn't tell you the name of a designer to save my neck. And I don't even remember what designer it was. But she said, this is like a $1,500 coat.
Oh my goodness.
And the reason it had been donated was the zipper pull was broken. You could still zip it. You could fix the thing with a paper clip. But somebody decided that their $1,500 jacket was kaput and donated it because of that. It's like that was revelatory to me about our privilege and what we need and don't need.
Yeah. Wow. We can also donate money.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's always a good commodity for sure.
Absolutely. Because I know one of the things PWA does is we buy fresh food and food that is more in line with the diet of the people that we're serving. And not all donations coming in are suitable for what they would like to eat. And so we try to go out and buy whatever's needed to make sure that the Essentials Market has food that they're going to enjoy.
And it's culturally appropriate. We had last Friday evening, we had a sort of talent show and community dinner for the folks in our refugee program. And I think there were probably 250 folks there. It was just a rocking good time. A lot of music, a lot of dancing, and culturally appropriate food. Burned my mouth. But people were just so happy to have it. And I realized when the young woman was staying with us, sandwiches are not an African thing. That's not a meal to them. And it was interesting because, Toronto is such a cosmopolitan city. And one of the things I always say about that is that you can get any kind of food in the world here. You can get cuisines I had never heard of till I got here. I discovered Tibetan dumplings that I never knew about. And gosh, they're wonderful. Except I will say, as a transplanted American, you can't get decent Southern barbecue and you can't get good Tex-Mex. I have to go back to the States for that. But then, suddenly I'm in the process of finding African markets, and specifically folks who sell Ugandan food. And they're out there.
Yes, they are.
And I have to look for them. And I learned to make matoke. which is kind of like a spicy beef stew, only instead of potatoes, it's like green bananas, the little mini bananas. It's actually quite tasty. It's a little different. It's not your Irish stew. It's definitely a Ugandan stew. But green bananas are an acceptable carbohydrate substitute.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also just thinking, what a wonderful way to learn about different cultures too.
Yeah.
Right? To learn about them, to appreciate them, to experience different things just like that, cuisine and, belief systems. I always find it interesting to talk to people that have those different experiences and to hear what their belief system is, what their environment growing up was, and things like that. We can learn so much from that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, some of the, certainly as I mentioned before, some of the egregious laws that are being passed in African countries are an odious relic of colonialism. But another kind of odious relic of colonialism is in my opinion, the kind of fundamentalist Christianity that has been imposed on people.
Yeah.
And they come here and they don't necessarily realize that there are, in fact, other ways to believe, other ways to worship. And, I don't want to, I can't substitute for the kind of worship that they find affirming and speaks to their souls. But I can say that, not every religious institution is going to reject you for being queer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're talking about education,
yeah.
and you mentioned earlier people's attitude and saying they're coming in and they're taking jobs away from us and they're using our system and etc. How do you educate those that have that belief? What do you say?
Well, this is a very unpastoral thing to say, but my initial instinct is to educate them upside the head with a 2x4, but because I really have very, very little patience for those attitudes, and I have to take a deliberate step back and try to present them with facts. Now, mind you, I encounter a lot of people who seem to be immune to facts, but I keep trying.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? That's a whole nother story. Immunity to facts.
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh, yes.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me when it comes to Christian fundamentalists is what Jesus taught. And I thought Christianity was embodying the teachings of Jesus the Christ. That's what I thought it was. But Christ taught, Jesus taught, love one another, help one another, look after one another, be kind to one another, even the Samaritan. Like, I'm not sure where the misunderstanding has dropped in, because, when you read what Jesus' journey was, it was love, period, full stop.
Yeah, and I grew up in a fundamentalist tradition, and it took me a long time to understand that is not the only way to be a genuine, authentic Christian. And it took me a long time to understand that it is not simply about intellectual assent to a set of beliefs. It's about, as you say, embodying the life and teachings of the Christ, to manifest that life in my life. And that's been a journey. It's been a long and winding road. And I look back on what I was taught as a child and what is unfortunately still being taught. And it bothers me. I don't actually like to be putting down other people's spiritual practices or religion. But honestly, I really fear fundamentalism. And I look, as a transplanted American, obviously, I keep an eye on what's happening in the United States, and it scares the hell out of me. I mean, I don't want to go all political on your show, but I am convinced that if Donald Trump is ever reelected president, Canada will be getting refugees from the United States.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I've told probably more of my queer friends down there than I can possibly house that there will always be a place in my basement, at least. It's going to get crowded.
Yeah.
They
Might
have to build an
to
addition.
offer up some other homes.
Yes. Well, that's the thing,
Yeah.
treating the stranger as part of your family and making them part of your family because they are part of your family.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's the lesson, right? Is really learning to understand that I am you and you are me. And the way I treat you reflects me, not you, right? It reflects who I am, not who you are.
Absolutely.
And so let's hope that these things that are happening, and I know it's some people can think it's a Pollyanna perspective, but it's also an opportunity to really recognize that, because I believe that when we are too comfortable, we become very complacent, and we really don't see further than our noses. And something has to really be uncomfortable, and we have to be in the discomfort to recognize these kinds of things, about how we treat others, how we treat ourselves, how we, do things, etc.
Yeah. Well, I think learning to live with that discomfort is a spiritual practice. It's being willing to wrestle with questions that may not have answers, or to be open to the idea that the answers are not what I thought they were.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version of this. Of course, when I was in seminary, every seminarian sort of near the end of their program ends up having to write a paper on their own theology, and to take everything that they have learned over the however many years they've been studying and distill it into what they personally believe about God, about Jesus, about the Spirit, about the church, about missions, about the cosmos, about rituals, everything. And as a good seminarian, I wrote that paper. It was almost 75 pages long. It had over 200 footnotes.
It's almost a book.
Yeah, basically. And I looked at that and I said, I am never going to be able to remember all this. And so I said, I need to distill this into a one-page poem, which I did. And it was lovely. And I looked at it and I said, this is really too much for my little mind to keep in the forefront. What I really need is something that'll fit on the back of a business card.
Yes.
And so I have this business card.
God
I love
loves you.
That's the basic. And on the
Mhm.
back of it, I have my own personal credo.
Mhm.
God loves us unconditionally and passionately and eternally, and God wants a loving relationship with us. And to that end, God sent Jesus Christ to become one of us and show us how to love God and love one another. And God wants us to have joy-filled, loving relationships with one another and with all creation, and to share with the whole world the love we've received in tangible ways. And sometimes I think those last three words are the most important. Well, the first three words and the last three words.
Yeah.
God loves us. And
Yeah.
we're to share it in tangible ways.
Yeah.
And that's why I do the work that I do.
Yeah.
You know,
Beautiful.
it's
Yeah.
a tangible thing to offer someone a parka in Canada.
Mhm.
It's a tangible thing to open your heart and your home. And it's a tangible thing to give people the food that they enjoy and to help them create a community and become part of a community.
Yeah. Absolutely. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Community is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And coming in, you don't know anybody necessarily. So
Yeah.
having a community, really important. People who really care about you.
Absolutely. And that's part of what we do is you know, a lot of these people, you know, we can help them, but they can also help each other.
Yes. Absolutely.
We're, you know,
And that's so important, I think, Deana. You know, being an immigrant myself, I really appreciate, and I never did so much before, just how being sometimes in a group of with a group of people that are familiar with you know, each other's backgrounds, each other's cultures, each other's language, you know, all that kind of thing can really be comforting at times, you know. And so I think that's an important thing for us to realize here, because we are such a diverse, multicultural population. You know, that it's both and. I don't believe that one way is better, you know, to be all the time with the people you are comfortable with, but sometimes that can be very healing and helpful on the journey that people are on.
And we're down to our last 3 minutes. Time goes by quickly. Deana, a final thought. What would you like people to be left with? Like the most important thing that you think people should know coming out of this interview? God loves you.
unconditionally and passionately and eternally. So share it.
Share it. Awesome. Mark, do you have final thoughts?
My mind is blown, and I know I'm going to be exploring. And my final thought is thank you for coming and providing an education not only to myself but to others who are going to watch this podcast. I hope you come back.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you so much.
Cheryl.
Yeah, I'm grateful for this conversation as well. I just invite people to be more curious, to be more open to learning something new about others' experiences, and just being able to respect and accept rather than to be resistant.
I love that. I love that. And I'm just going to say, don't judge a book by its cover. Don't look at people and think you know them, because you do not. Have a conversation, sit down and connect, share a cup of coffee or a tea or break bread together. At that point, you just might get to know a brand new friend. Thank you, Deana, for being here. You truly are a godsend in our world, and I am so grateful to know you. And to my beautiful co-hosts, to everybody watching, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. This truly has been a monumental day, and I'm grateful to everyone. Be sure to come back again next week, because we're going to be here bringing great news new information, courageous conversations. You're watching the New Thought Media Network. Bye for now.
Bye.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.